It's the Bradfield Weather Podcast, underwritten by McAllen Construction. McAllen Construction, from the first dig to the last nail, and McAllen does snow removal. And by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business that's built for you. I am Dan Lavallo. He is meteorologist Bradfield. We are putting this podcast together on Friday, February the 7th. And Brad, I don't know about March, but February is coming in like a lion. What is going on?
Oh my goodness, Dan, the snow lovers, you can hear them rejoicing. I can hear them outside my window rejoicing here because this is the pattern. This is the pattern that they and I have been looking for. And we are in a literal storm firing line that actually began yesterday, will continue tomorrow night, which is Saturday night, February 8th, and will continue 3 more times next week, Dan. We've got storm after storm after storm as the atmosphere tries to maintain a thermal balance. And what am I talking about there? Well, we've essentially got a ridge of high pressure over the southeastern part of the United States, and it has been mild, and my family can tell you about that firsthand, that it's been very mild in Florida, with temperatures in the 70s by day and only falling off into the 60s at night. So there's been some really warm weather in that location. Meanwhile, Arctic air has been spilling across Canada again. We've had one of those stratospheric warming events which shakes the cold air loose from the North Pole and starts transitioning it to the south. So over a relatively short distance, we've got abnormally warm air and abnormally cold air. So, Dan, what essentially storms are is that they try to maintain a thermal balance in the atmosphere. And we are all out of whack with that really cold air nearby to our north and the really warm air relatively nearby to our south. And the storms are running along that boundary between them. And it is setting up just right. And we're going to see that when we get to the On the Weather Map segment. It's setting up just right, Dan, that we have a storm track that is going to continue to try to keep this thermal balance, try to balance out the cold air to the north and the warm air to the south via these storms. And they're going to come on a fairly regular basis. Like we get a storm, then the atmosphere goes out of thermal whack again. We get another storm, tries to put it back into thermal balance. Then it gets out of whack again. We get another storm. And we are in essentially the firing line, Dan.
Well, that said, and again, we're putting this podcast together on Friday, February the 7th. We've got a storm coming in, so let's go to our On the Weather Map segment as far as this storm track is concerned. What can you tell us?
Well, Dan, the storm of yesterday, so in other words, Thursday, February 6th, gave us anywhere from a coating to about 1.5 inches of snow. Now, that's not a big deal, except that at my house in the early afternoon yesterday, it was 23 degrees and pouring rain. So we had ice, Dan, and that has made for skating rink-like conditions on places that have been untreated. Now, briefly today, the temperature will be above 32. But what is happening is we've got a cold front coming through this morning, Dan. I cannot rule out that there'll be a quick snow flurry, maybe a couple of sleet pellets or some big raindrops. That will signify the front coming through, but you will know that the cold front's here this afternoon because winds are going to be gusting on the order of 40 to 45 miles per hour, Dan, and the temperature will start to drop. I'd say mid-30s for the high this morning, temperatures tending to fall off to below freezing this afternoon, and then down into the teens overnight tonight. Now, by this evening, high pressure is going to be located near Erie, Pennsylvania, So we're going to start to see the winds diminishing overnight tonight. And then by tomorrow morning, Saturday, February 8th, the high pressure will be located right over Scranton, Pennsylvania. Now, meantime, a storm will be forming in northeastern Oklahoma. That storm is going to track to the east and northeast. By tomorrow evening, the storm will be right along the Ohio-West Virginia border, moving toward us. Now, by Sunday morning, that low is going to track out south of New England to the benchmark. And Dan, you've heard me mention the benchmark in past podcasts. What it is it's just a spot on the map. It's 40 degrees north, 70 degrees west. But we, the meteorological community, find that when a storm takes a track toward the benchmark and even over the benchmark, that is when we get significant snow in southern New England. And it looks like this storm track is going to be perfect. And it does look like the atmosphere, after this front comes through today, and we get that gusty north and northwesterly wind up to 45 miles per hour and the falling temperatures, that the atmospheric column overhead is going to be cold enough that this next one, this one coming for Saturday night and Sunday morning, is going to be in the form of all snow.
Wow. Well, and I know you've got specifics, Brad, as far as timing things out, maybe compare some weather models. What can you tell us in the area of specifics for this upcoming storm?
Good question, Dan. The storm specifics are as follows. The storm begins around dark, maybe around dinner time tomorrow evening. So let's say, 5:30, 6:30. So if you have any plans to be out and about driving around tomorrow, my youngest son is and his girlfriend are picking up a dog tomorrow. So if you've got plans to be out and about on the roadways or whatever, the weather is going to be fine for travel tomorrow during the day. But as I said, the snow commences around dinner time and it really starts to ramp up. So if you've got plans for Saturday night, I'm not saying to cancel them or anything, but I'm saying you're going to have to be really careful because the snow, I think, will come down heavily at times Saturday night. And then the snow will end and taper, let's say between 7 and 10 in the morning on Super Bowl Sunday. So for your Super Bowl travel, if you can hold off until the middle part or the early to middle part of the afternoon, the DPW crews and your plow services and everything should be able to get things back in order. But I'll tell you what, there's going to be quite a bit of snow to remove from this upcoming system. Now, you were asking me about stats and probabilities, Dan. I've never really seen this one done this way. But the National Weather Service is always making new products, and I think good products. Listen to this one, Dan. What do you think of this, okay? The probability of 6 inches or more of snow, even in Bridgeport, right along the Connecticut shore, they have a 51% chance of over 6 inches. So, that's the flip of a coin.
Right.
Heads I win, tails you lose. So we'll 51% there. For Waterbury and Hartford, it's bumped up to 56%. From Springfield to Norwich and points northeast toward Boston, there's a 2 out of 3 chance. 66% chance of getting 6 inches or more of snow. So that's a pretty good sizable storm, Dan. I broke it down for you into 6-hour segments, okay? From 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. tomorrow, no snow. There might be slight little dustings or accumulations right along the Connecticut-New York border because the storm is coming from that direction, west-southwest to east-northeast. So it'll be into western Connecticut first. Now, by 7 p.m. tomorrow night, 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. Sunday morning, out your way, Dan, out Torrington, western third of Connecticut, let's say, during that 6 hour window from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., I'm looking for a solid 4 to 6 inches for you. The rest of the state, central and eastern Connecticut, it gets a little bit of a later start. So in that 6 hour window, I'm looking for 2 to 4 inches of snow there. Now, the window 1 in the morning Sunday to 7 in the morning Sunday, 3 to 6 inches statewide. So, Dan, if you take your 4 to 6 that I gave you in Torrington from 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., and then you add the 3 to 6 from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m., you're getting totals of what? 7 to 12 inches of snow.
That's right.
So
Yep.
this is a good snowstorm for Connecticut, and we've got the base out there. We've got the 1 inch of snow with the ice on top of it, so we got a little bit of a base. So once the snow starts falling, it will accrue readily. We get this 6 to 8 to 9 inches of snow, whatever it ends up being, Saturday night into Sunday morning, and then what I told you, Dan. We've got more opportunities coming next week, possibly as many as 3.
Wow. Well, it's interesting, and we'll get to that, our post-storm on the weather map segment in just a moment. But you mentioned what the National Weather Service is doing, and I noticed that too, a 56% chance of an area getting so many inches of snow, 66%, 51%. Is that something new?
They've done it before, but they more or less broad brush an entire state. Like like I look at the long range now, and for these storms coming next week, Dan, they'll break down. They'll say from 7 in the morning on Tuesday to 7 in the morning on Wednesday. The probability of getting more than a quarter of an inch. Now, why do they say a quarter of an inch of melted precipitation? Because that's significant. That would be a 2-3 inch snowfall, something like that. So they say the probability of getting at least a quarter of an inch melted, and then they break it down into percentages like 40 to 50%, 50 to 60%, and they do it like statewide. This breaking it down city by city, I have not seen done before. So they're working to improve, to work to improve like a pinpoint forecast where you take into consideration things like elevation. And again, I go back to my living in Granby for 28 years, Dan. The center of the town was at 200 feet, but parts of West Granby and North Granby were 1,200 feet. So I remember a storm, I believe it was in April of 1997. I think it was April 1st, 1997. And I might be off by a year.
No, you're not. I remember that date. I'll tell you a story in just a minute, but go ahead.
That storm, Dan, there was 13 inches in the center of town, and it was heavy, wet snow. There was 28 inches of snow on my deck in West Granby. And I am, at more up toward that 1,000-foot elevation rather than the 200 in the center of town. So it looks like someone's lying or someone's exaggerating. Because if you get all of a sudden a National Weather Service report from Granby, 13 inches of snow, yeah, that's correct for the center of town. Then I said 28 inches of snow in West Granby, and you think, oh, he's exaggerating. There's no way he's saying double what we have. Well, there was, and it's because of the elevation. So what the National Weather Service is trying to do here, Dan, is pinpoint, to your exact location, taking into effect these elevation concerns and local things like sea breezes and stuff, exactly what the weather will be at your house. And that is tremendous improvement.
So I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah, please.
I'm working in morning radio, Hartford. This is how we
DRC.
met. Yep. It's April 1st, 1997. 2 days before, I had bought a sedan, not a four-wheel drive vehicle. And people were saying, because four-wheel drive vehicles really weren't that big in 97. People said, well, you ought to get one because you're going to have to deal with snow. And I said, well, I'll worry about that in the fall. It's going to be April. I picked it up 2 days before April 1st. I said, it's going to be April. I'm not going to have to worry about snow. And wouldn't you know, we got that big snowstorm. And of course, morning radio, I'm leaving my house at about 3:30 in the morning. I couldn't back out of my driveway. I had 13 inches of snow. And wouldn't you know, a neighbor who had a plow service happened to be driving by, and he said, Dan, I'll get you out. And that's how I was able to go to work in my new car, a sedan, on April the 1st. And I thought I wouldn't have to deal with any snow until the fall. And look at what happened. So I remember that storm, and I remember that date.
That is a good story, Dan. And who would think that on April 1st, or I guess March 30th, if you purchased the car or whatever, that you would think you'd have to worry about a big snowstorm. But the weather is humbling, and from your work in broadcasting, and I know from my work in broadcasting, it just doesn't fly to have your morning show host call and say, oh, I can't make it in today.
No.
You got a big snowstorm.
No.
That does not fly.
No. And you can also look it up, because I'm a little bit concerned. The Argots open their season on April 4th. You can look it up. April 4th, 2016, we got 4 inches of snow. So when you start dealing with April and scheduling outside events, it really is a roll of the dice.
Oh, absolutely. And as a varsity baseball coach
right.
for Granby High School, for some reason, the town of Coventry isn't really much colder than the town of Granby. They're very similar in terms of climate. But I will tell you, for some reason, every time we go there, it's sleeting, or I've got my winter parka on, and a wool hat. Who would think you'd be playing baseball in this? One time I was trying to hit fly balls to our outfielders, and the wind was so strong in my face I was hitting it about 50 feet. And the boys were laughing at me and stuff, but I'll tell you what, it's you can have some wild weather in April, that's for sure.
No question. Well, now let's go to our On the Weather Map segment again, Brad. As far as post-storm, what does that look like?
All right, Dan, I think we should number these, all right? Number one, we'll say, was yesterday with that little, coating to 1.5 inches of snow with the ice on top. Number two comes tomorrow night. Saturday night, largely winter storm watch for all of Connecticut, Dan. I think Mystic is going to get a big snowstorm out of this. So I'm pretty much saying the whole state. You saw from the National Weather Service stats, Bridgeport, better than 50-50 shot of getting over 6 inches. All right, so post this one, storm number 2, so we get past Super Bowl Sunday, we're into Monday. High pressure is over northern Virginia with a secondary cold front coming through New England. Temperatures on Monday will only be in the upper 20s and low 30s, so we're not going to have any real melting. Now, by Tuesday morning at 7 in the morning, we'll have high pressure right over Connecticut. Now, the models that I'm looking at are saying a low of 5. I think that's high end because we are going to have clear sky, we're going to have calm wind, and we're going to have deep snow cover. So I'm going to say for Tuesday morning, 10 below to 5 above for Tuesday. Then let's go with the European now, because that's the model that I tend to like. It, in my estimation, tends to be right in that middle range, that 3 to 7 day range, than the GFS model. So and the Canadian. So let's just go with the European by now. They have storm number 3 in this series, developing Tuesday evening, ending Wednesday morning, potentially 2 to 5 inches. Okay, so we have coating to 1.5 inches out there now. We're getting, say, 6 to 10 inches tomorrow night. We're possibly getting 2 to 5 inches Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning. Wednesday night into Thursday morning now, the European has storm number 4 coming. This one looks more icy. So we'll go for 1 to 3 inches of snow, then ice, which is bad. So if you're looking at it, there could be a school issue on Tuesday because it's so darn cold. But Wednesday for snow in the morning, maybe just a delay. Thursday for snow and ice, there could be no school, there could be delays or whatever. Then next weekend, and we will certainly have another podcast by then for sure, maybe 2 or 3. By next Saturday, they've got another storm coming with maybe 1 inch or 2 of slop on the south coast, ranging up to 4 inches up in northern Connecticut. So, the big storm looks like it's going to be Saturday night, the bigger of the storms. But if you lived in Connecticut all your life, you might call 6 to 10 inches a moderate snowstorm. It's not a blockbuster. You have to get up into the 1 to 2 foot range to call it a blockbuster. But we've got a series of light to moderate storms coming, and there could be as many as 5 of them. So, the plow guys who have not been making much in the way of money this year, I told my plow guy, rest up. Every opportunity you can over the next week or 2, rest up. We'll tell McAllen Construction that too, one of our underwriters.
Right. Couple of points. Point number 1, you mentioned 6 to 10 inches for us is a moderate snowstorm, except in this day and age of social media and the hype that the local TV stations give. I'll guarantee you they're going to make this upcoming storm sound like a blockbuster.
Oh, Armageddon. But, Dan, we've talked about this before on the podcast, that you and I were blessed because we came up through the heyday of radio and television. We did.
Right.
I mean, as children growing up in Connecticut, everyone hung on the words of Brad Davis or you or Bob Steele saying, Avon Public Schools, no school all day. Andover Public Schools. And you'd be on the A's and you'd go, I live in Simsbury.
Right.
I'm going to check back in 25 minutes. But we grew up in that heyday where everyone was hanging on your every word. Now, with Instagram, with LinkedIn, with Facebook, with X, I mean, and you've got all these guys hanging out a shingle.
Right. Yeah.
They do not have a lot of them do not have meteorology credentials. They are not meteorologists. They are what I call foosticoders. They look at what the National Weather Service output is for every computer model. And Bernie Rayno, who actually, I don't know if you know who he is, Dan. He's a bigwig at AccuWeather.
Yep.
And he's my friend, and he's great on Northeast. He does a lot of snow forecasting, and he wants to be on the Bradfield Weather podcast. So we should put him on.
Absolutely.
With us. But he has coined the phrase, the windshield wiper effect. And I always thought I was captaining a major seaworthy yacht. You don't go hard over. You make slight adjustments. It does the public no good to get what Bernie and I stole refer to as the windshield wiper effect. Storm's going to hit. Storm's going to miss. Storm's going to hit. Storm's going to miss, based on every 6 hours of the computer models coming in. I would always say, as the chief meteorologist at NBC Connecticut, we have to make slow adjustments. There's such a thing. There are a lot of these stupid sayings, but I like this one. The trend is your friend. So in other words, if you've got a major hit, then 6 hours later it's a little less of a hit. Then 6 hours later it's a little less than that. Then a little less than that. You can see the trend is pulling away from a big storm. So, then I would make adjustments to the forecast. But to all of a sudden go from hit to miss, back to whoops, it's a hit. It doesn't do the public any good. Then you've got all these people who don't know what they're doing out there issuing forecasts because they're the proverbial foosticoders that I call them. You've got a mess. You've got people saying, well, this guy said blah, blah, blah. Well, people don't know that this guy, has no degree in anything, and he's issuing weather forecasts. So, it's just kind of a crazy mishmash out there where you've got people masquerading that they're meteorologists, and then, then the Rachel Franks and the Ryan Hanrahans and the Mark Dixons and all the people that are on TV now, the Joe Furies, they have to deal with these people like, well, this guy says blah, blah, blah. You don't want to be insulting and go, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But that can essentially be the case. So,
well, and Brad, the problem is you got a lot of these guys who are on YouTube, for example, who are getting hundreds of thousands of views, and they have no degree in meteorology, and there they are getting more hits than the meteorologists you were talking about.
That's exactly right, Dan. They're more entertainers, and they're but people don't. The layperson doesn't know. Like, I've been your friend for years, and if you ask me, what did Dan Lavallo study in college? I don't know. But so a lot of people don't know. And they just think, oh, this guy must be a meteorologist, and they just go along with it. So the only advice I'd give is to, if you like us, follow us. Bradfieldweather.com every day has the forecast. I mean, I think Rachel is awesome. Joe Fury does a good job. Ryan does a good job. I mean, you've got a lot of meteorologists that are meteorologists that are good. So I would just go, when it starts hitting the fan, you want to go with someone they know what they're talking about. Like if a hurricane was bearing down on Connecticut, I would hope that some people would say, gee, I trust Brad, or gee, I trust Rachel with this, or gee, I trust Ryan or Joe. That's what you need to do.
Well said. Well, and on that note, and again, we're putting this together on Friday, February the 7th. What does our immediate forecast look like?
All right, Dan, today it's variably cloudy. We've got that cold front coming through. Temperatures are up into the 30s. This afternoon now, the podcast should be posted and up by then. The winds are going to be gusting between 40 and 45 miles per hour. I wouldn't be shocked if someone gets to 50. And with that kind of wind, a branch comes down on a power line, we could have a few scattered outages tonight. Variably cloudy, temperatures moving down into the teens, diminishing wind. Little note about that, Dan. When a meteorologist doesn't know what he's going to predict on terms of clouds, they say variably cloudy. I used to always say to the guys on my weather team, stress what you know. Like, say you don't know how cloudy it'll be, 10% or 90%. You don't know that, but you know it'll be windy. Just keep saying it over. Windy today. Windy. Did I mention how windy it'll be today? Accentuate what you know.
Right.
So a little weather tip for you, Dan, if you go into this business, all right? For Saturday, thickening clouds, but the roads should be fine during the day. Temperatures in the 30s. Saturday night, snow, heavy at times. Temperatures in the 20s, 4 to 8 inches statewide. Figuring 4 to 6 as a median for southern Connecticut, 6 to 8 or 9. Someone could pop 10 up in northern Connecticut. Sunday, any flurries ending in the morning. Temperatures in the 30s, 30 to 35, I'd say, for Super Bowl Sunday. And being the loyal Patriots fan that I am, my son Kurt gave me this, and I've got my hat on, so I'm repping my team, even though they were close to dead last, Dan, like your team.
Right.
But anyway, you got to stay loyal. You got to stay
right.
loyal.
Absolutely.
I got to ask you about your Super Bowl pick, but
Yep.
we'll ask at the end of the podcast, at the end of the weather. So Monday, mostly sunny, 28 to 34. Tuesday, increasing clouds, late day snow again. Temperature 26 to 32. Snow Tuesday night, ending Wednesday morning, 2 to 5 inches of accumulation. And I'm sure you will see and hear from us prior to that. And if that indeed does come to fruition. And then Wednesday night into Thursday morning, more snow, more ice, possibly changing to rain in parts of Connecticut Wednesday night into Thursday. But that's it, Dan. We're in the firing line. Now I'm going to put you, sportscaster Dan, in the firing line. Tell me about the Super Bowl.
Well, I had that windshield wiper effect because I was leaning toward Philadelphia, but upon further analysis, I am picking the Kansas City Chiefs to win and three-peat. This is the first time, by the way, of the 3 Super Bowls in which the Chiefs have competed, the last 3, that they go in as the favorites. They were underdogs the last 2 Super Bowls, and they won. I don't think that'll be a jinx, the fact they're a favorite. I'm picking the Chiefs to win. How about you?
Yeah, the running back for Philadelphia scares me.
Yeah, Barkley.
In that, he is so strong and powerful that if the Chiefs can stop him, they have a pretty decent chance, I think. If it becomes a shootout, you can put Mahomes up there with anybody. If it's a defensive struggle and both teams are having trouble with the offense, I'd give the edge to Philadelphia. But I'm going to go as you are, Dan, and going to say you put this all through the calculations and everything and come out with the Kansas City Chiefs to three-peat.
Well, and, I think the game is going to come down to the defensive coordinators, believe it or not, and Spagnuolo is one of the best ever with the Chiefs. And Fangio, who's a very good defensive coordinator with the Eagles, is 0-8 against the Chiefs. So what else do you need to know?
Wow. And you're right about Spagnuolo. And speaking of why I'm repping the Patriots, we talked about this before we went on the air, Dan. I am just so excited about the coaching changes that the Patriots have made. And I love Drake May as a young man and an athlete. And I think he is going to be a superstar in the NFL.
No question. Your Patriots' future right now is brighter than the future for my Giants, but we shall see. All right, my friend, to you and Sandy and your family and our podcast and radio audiences, be safe because we are in for quite a stretch of winter.
Dan, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and my best to you and Susan, and enjoy the snowstorm tomorrow night and enjoy Super Bowl Sunday.
Thanks, Brad. And again, a reminder, we have updates all the time at bradfieldweather.com. The Bradfield Weather Podcast has been underwritten by Action Carpet and Floor Covering of Simsbury, a family-run business that's built for you. And by McAllen Construction of Prospect. They service the entire state from the first nail to the last... What is it?
From
first
the first dig to the last nail.
That's
got it,
right.
Dan.
I got it right. From the first dig to the last nail. And remember, They do snow removal. Be well, everybody.